Hi, my name is Dan, and welcome to Affinity Workshop. Today we're going over the histogram. A histogram is a distribution of color and light values placed upon a chart. Usually you could find one on the back of your camera, and also in many editing programs. Let's take a look at a photograph I took of the back of my camera. And usually your camera histogram will be divided into 4 sections. The sections are darks, shadows, brights, and highlights. This is a tonal range going from black on the left-hand side to pure white on the right-hand side. I have another chart I'm going to bring up to help visualize that and explain it in a little bit more detail. Now, the height of the histogram chart actually shows you how many pixels are in that specific tonal range. There are actually 255 little tiny slices, 255 sections going from pure black all the way on the left to pure white on the right-hand side. Now that I mentioned that, when you shoot a photograph, you have to be careful that your histogram doesn't bunch up too much all the way on the left or all the way on the right. Because if it bunches up all the way on the left, that means you have a lot of pixels that are going into pure black. That means you're not going to be able to see them in the photograph, and you're completely losing detail as well. And on the right-hand side, as this histogram shows a little bit here, they're starting to really bunch up on the right-hand side. That means that anything past this actual line, this last number 255 section here, is going to be pure white. I'm going to have no detail, and if I tried to print that out on paper, actually there would be no ink. It would just show up as pure white. Now, if you intend that artistically, that's fine, but it's a great thing to be aware of. That's some basic info on histograms. Now let's check out the histogram inside of Affinity Photo. Here we have a photograph, and here is the Histogram Studio panel. Now you might notice that it has 3 different colors inside it. And that's because your camera makes all the colors of the spectrum by combining 3 main color channels. They are red, green, and blue. So this drop-down menu here selects those channels. You have a choice of selecting them all at once, or you can view just the red channel, for example. Or if you like, you can view the blue channel alone. I'm going to go back to all. To the right of that, it says layer, and there's a checkbox. So when you check that off, that means that only the selected layer in the layers panel will be showing its histogram. For example, if I go down to the bottom layer here, it says black background. If I click that, its histogram is quite different because it's pure black. Now if I uncheck this box here, it shows the histogram for all of these combined layers. Now at first that might seem confusing, but if you remember what we learned from layers, which layer is visible? This topmost layer is visible here. None of these other layers are visible, and the black background is underneath that, so it's not showing right now. So therefore, this histogram is showing you this photograph layer. Okay, so let's go to the right of this, and there we have a checkbox that says Marquee. So that's telling you that you can make a selection in your photograph, and it will display the histogram for that selection only. So let's do that. I'm going to go to the selection tool, and I'll pick out the rectangular marquee tool, and I'll make a selection on the photograph. I'm going to choose this kind of shadowy area in the building. So this inner part is selected. Then I'm going to click the marquee tool, and there's our histogram. It's kind of shadowy as we expected. I'll unclick that. Maybe I'll make a new selection here in the brighter area, and I'll do that. And that should be to the right, because that's where the brighter tones are. and I'll check off the marquee box again, and there's our histogram for that particular selection. So I'll uncheck that, and I will go to Select, Deselect to get rid of our selection. Now, if you look at the Histogram Studio panel, there's a little panel preference icon here, and when you click on that, it says Advanced. That's going to show our advanced options of the histogram panel. I'll click on that, and now you see a bunch of figures show up below the chart. So this is general descriptive distribution information from your histogram, and at the very bottom you have the total pixel count. This grayed out area to the right becomes active when you put your cursor inside of the histogram panel, and now at the top it says level, and it's telling you what section of the histogram you're in. So for example, remember I said there's 255 sections. If I put my cursor way to the left, that's the very first section. And it tells me I'm in that section, and then underneath it gives you a pixel count. That's how many pixels are in that level section. And the very bottom, it just gives you a different way of looking at it. That's percentile 0. So if I go way to the right, you can see the level and the sections are increasing, and it's going to increase until I get to 255. That's the last slice. And there it shows I have 102 pixels in that last slice, and I'm at the 100th percentile. So below that, it says minimum, and there's a 0, and maximum, and there's a 1. And those constrain or expand the tonal range represented in the histogram. So 1 would be the complete range. And let's say I just wanted darks, just like on your camera histogram. Let's say I just wanted to look at the very first quarter to the left of this histogram. So then I can highlight that and put in 0.25 for the first quarter, hit enter, and that would be the first quarter alone. Okay, so I'm going to put that back to 1. So the last thing that we really didn't cover is this little hazard sign here. And as you highlight it, that's just saying, hey, this histogram's a little bit coarse. If you want to generate a finer histogram, click it. Why not? So there you go. So we've covered what black looks like for a histogram. And let's look at something low key. This is an old promotional photo I have, and this should generate in just a second. There you go. Now notice that everything in here is black, but if you look at the histogram, I'm not bunching up against this wall. There's detail in everything in this photograph. Like I say, if you want to be artistic in your own right, you can bunch it up against the wall and go into pure black. Let's take a look at this photograph. So here's the histogram for this photograph. It's pretty well distributed, and it has some blacks here. Now I have some area of this photograph here that is getting into black a little bit, so it's still a little bit bunched up against that wall. Okay, let's look at the next photograph, which you've seen already, and that histogram is going to look a lot different. And the last example I have is actually a high key photograph. It is a high key photograph. A lot of the information's in this upper region, but none of it's really bunching up against that wall. So while I have a lot of white in here, you can still see grain and detail. I kind of made this look like an old photograph. This was actually from a demonstration, I believe, on 4th of July. So I made it look like an old photograph, put a lot of nitty-gritty detail into it. A lot of high key photographs are about beauty, and it's a great way to shoot a person and make them shine. But I took a little bit of a different take here, obviously. But as you can see from the histogram, none of it's bunching up against the right-hand wall, the 255th section. So I actually have good detail in the photograph. That's about it for today. If you have any questions, please let me know. And keep shooting, and thanks for joining us.